Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and today I'm broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. For those who are joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Let us know where you are joining from and how you center equity in your work or aspire to do so. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. So I encourage you to hit the share and invite buttons and invite your people, your network, your family, and your friends to join the Remix EQ community today. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers us the opportunity to connect and build community with each other around the equity work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative and effective ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, work, and play. So, throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make this world a more just place. So, today we are in the second half of season 3, and we are continuing our conversations on community participation. In particular, we are reflecting on origin stories. I know, we often associate origin stories with superheroes. The backstory of seemingly ordinary people who come into their powers, don their capes, and accept responsibility to save the world from evil. Did I just describe you? You participate in our Remix EQ community because you are in pursuit to make the world a more just place, which many consider a duty, a calling, and a responsibility. And the evil, injustice, of course, and it can take many forms, such as oppressive power, which we communicate in isms such as racism, gendered racism, ableism, discrimination in hiring and promotion practices in the workplace or disciplinary practices in schools, lack of representation of Black women in computing, BIPOC authors in libraries, and Broadway shows produced or directed by Black theaters and artists. Structural barriers, such as limited public transportation that narrows employment opportunities for families in low wealth neighborhoods, and inequities, which we often describe as gaps, such as in literacy or wealth as it relates to home ownership or the ability to have an emergency savings. Yes, evil abounds. And you don your cape, your uniform, your justice oriented merch, and you activate your powers, such as applying critical perspectives, like Black feminist epistemologies or reparative justice, which are responsive to the lived experiences of people who have been harmed by oppression. And it also amplifies their counter narratives and their acts of resistance. You engage in appreciative and participatory practices where you ask communities what they need and want before swooping in to save them. And you co design with community stakeholders social and technical solutions that bring about meaningful and desired change. And you engage them in planning and implementing evaluation processes. And of course, you abide by collaborative and humanistic principles such as transparency, accountability, compassion, and care. These perspectives, practices, and principles guide your work to make the world a more just place. So, if you walk, talk, and work like a superhero, you're a superhero. And you have an origin story, which we'll reveal next. Yay! Hi, Chris. How are you? I'm glad you could join. He says he's looking forward to today's episode, and we're looking forward to you engaging with us and reflecting together on our origin stories. So, welcome. For those who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live, and we're amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. So, thank you for sharing and inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to interact with me and each other. Post comments, ask questions as we continue our dialogue about community participation, origin stories. During this episode, you are part of our Remix EQ Live experience and you are part of our Remix EQ community. In today's episode, I am asking you to come to terms with your superhero destiny. Together, we'll reflect on our origin stories and how they've shaped our pursuits of equitable outcomes in the communities in which we live, work, and play. I'll offer some framing for identifying those empowering moments, memories, and experiences that compose your origin stories. And I'll also prompt you to consider how your origin stories connect you to the communities you serve and others who work to make the world a more just place. For those who tune into Remix EQ Live regularly, this is another exploration of our why. So let's begin by asking ourselves, which of your past experiences compelled you into battle against injustice? As always, I invite you to add your origin stories, your insights, your examples into the comments to share with our Remix EQ community. Your origin story could center on a pivotal moment. That is, compared to other events, interactions, observations in your life, this moment stands out and marks the start of your justice pursuits. For example, when I reflect on my school experiences, which were filled with many racist moments, the one that stands out for me is when I confronted my sixth grade teacher about her only writing the names of Black and Brown children on the board, when in fact, the majority of my classmates were white and the entire class was disruptive. While my response was crude, emotional, and landed me in ISS, which is in school suspension. It's my first memory of me really finding the courage to use my voice to speak up and against racism to someone in authority. And I've continued this practice of speaking about and against injustice throughout my life. I even made a career out of it. So, as you reflect, consider if a pivotal moment, event, interaction, or observation puts you on a pathway for pursuing justice. And if so, feel free to share, if comfortable, with us in the comments or explore later during your reflection time. Origin stories are not only pivotal, they can also be serial. That is, a series of events, interactions, or observations throughout your life nudged or pushed you to begin your pursuit of justice. For example, when I reflect on my career, it's composed of a series of projects with different organizations and collaboratives that serve various communities across the country. These projects range from racial equity in education to food justice in communities to broadening participation in community-based STEM learning among children and their families. And because I center equity in my work, I have the opportunity to notice patterns of inequity as it relates to neighborhoods or social groups. And I also have the opportunity to add to my repertoire recurring or unique approaches to removing structural barriers or closing gaps. And I'm always eager to share these learnings with others. And I bring them into my conversations and new collaborations whenever I can. And at the same time, I also encounter professionals who feel somewhat isolated from others doing similar work in different communities and share my eagerness to connect. And it's these series of interactions with them and their work that were nudges that led me to host and produce this show, Remix EQ Live. And I share this example to create some space for you as you reflect. It's important to consider more than just the experiences that put us on the path to pursuing justice, but we must also begin to identify those experiences that have shaped our pathways and our pursuits. When you tune into Remix EQ Live interview shows, you notice that I ask every guest to introduce themselves and share any twists and turns that led them to their current role. I do this to normalize career changes and to also preview or offer insight into who, what, and how they study inequity and pursue justice. Because as you know, the evil, which we name injustice, goes by many names and takes many forms, as we discussed earlier. And in order to do battle with such a mighty enemy, we are always reflecting and learning from our wins and losses, adding new perspectives, adding new principles, new practices to our repertoire. So when we identify those series of events, interactions, observations that led us to apply a new perspective or engage in a different methodology, there's an origin story there that is very powerful. So, of course, please feel free to share any of your serial origin stories, insights, and examples with us, if comfortable, into the comments, or you can think and reflect and elaborate on this later during your personal journaling time. I share these two examples to illustrate just how different origin stories can be. For some, they are these pivotal moments, like my sixth grade Find Your Voice, Speak Your Truth Against Injustice experience, where I immediately don my cape and accept my responsibility to pursue justice for myself and others and come into my powers along the way. Or it can be a series of experiences throughout your personal and professional life that nudge or nag at you to do something different, to make change. While you contemplate whether you'll accept this responsibility, you grow your power. You learn and apply critical perspectives. You engage in appreciative and participatory practices, and you abide by collaborative and humanistic principles. Eventually, you accept this responsibility and you don your cape and some justice oriented merch and you use your powers to make the world a more just place. So, as we continue, I want you to consider one more question. How have you joined forces with others in your pursuit to make the world a more just place? I ask this question because most of us have learned that we cannot fight injustice, dismantle structural barriers, redress inequities, and close gaps by ourselves. And you have examples of who and how you work in collaboration to make this change. So please share with us in the comments about the work you've done with your super friends, your avengers of inequities, your posse of justice pursuers. We'd love to add these examples to our Remix EQ community. And for those who feel isolated because they're the only ones in their workplace talking about equity or working to foster more inclusive spaces, or if you have yet to find your people who care about changing the world in the same ways you do, I want to offer up a few reasons or goals, if you're pitching this idea to others, for joining forces. So, first, we can join forces to add capacity. This means you want to increase your ability to carry out your goals or realize your mission. This looks like organizations who have complementary services or expertise teaming up to increase their scope of work. For example, I team up with a summer program that aims to mentor and develop African American boys into manhood. My organization adds capacity by designing and delivering culturally relevant and community centered STEM and literacy learning. We contribute to a particular piece of these young boys' development in terms of academic, social and emotional, and career learning. Another way to join forces or reason to join forces is to grow impact. This may mean that your organization wants to reach more people, implement more services, or provide more relevant and desired services to a target or focal community. One way my organization supports organizations that want to grow their impact is through evaluation services. So we work with mission driven organizations to generate evidence of their impact. by defining objectives, collecting and analyzing data, and communicating their stories of change so these organizations can improve their services or practices and also position themselves to grow in terms of funding or productive collaborations. And finally, you want to join forces so that you can build community, which is what this Remix EQ Live experience is about. Creating and holding space for professionals who center equity in their work, aka superheroes, to connect and help them find their people, their posse of justice pursuers, because fellowship is necessary for the soul. But also, it's a space to hone our powers, our perspectives, our practices, and principles, and to listen and learn from each other about why and how we do this very necessary work to bring about equitable outcomes in the places in which we live, work, and play. Oh, look, we have a comment. Oh, hi, Orlando. How are you? It's good to see you here in this space. Oh my goodness. Flashback. In sixth grade, when you found your voice and spoke out, were the results afterwards positive? Or were you able to speak with the teacher, or did you alienate her and her administration? Right. That's a great question. Right. And I'm going to answer it and then kind of elaborate a little bit. Yeah, so I found my voice, and the results afterwards immediately were not positive because when you are trying to find your voice, especially as a young person, tone, right, and emotions really fill the space. And so it's very hard to communicate like we do when we're adults with like calm words. We thought about our choices, and we understand how to convey messages and meanings in ways that other people will receive them. So when I think about, did it alienate the teacher and the administration? I think they felt very uncomfortable about the fact that a young person in their school was raising these issues of racism. But I think it also like alienated me, right? And I think that's one thing we want to think about in our spaces, like especially with youth, when we have these opportunities to, like, when we decide to prioritize and create a space where students feel safe, where students feel free from discrimination, where students feel free from microaggressions and any racism, we have to give them space to speak in their own words. And we can definitely coach and guide them in this process. But we also have to understand that if a youth is speaking up against authority, that it is taking a lot of courage. It is taking a lot of emotion, and we need to take care of that and take care of them. And really lean into not whether or not it was appropriate for you to do that, or I, as the administration or the teacher, am embarrassed that you said this about me, but maybe asking the question about what is it that I can do to not make you feel that way? Or what is it that I can do to create like a very comfortable and safe space? So when these actions happen, right? When these discrimination points happen, right? That you bring them to me, and I don't meet them with defense, but I meet them with an openness that allows for us to have a conversation and dialogue about it, and to think about what are ways that we can put solutions in place so that everybody feels comfortable. But I think it's a great question, is that when and even as adults, right, when someone is speaking their truth about their experience and they're bringing it forward, we need to think about how much courage it took that person to be that vulnerable, and also how much discomfort they must be in to speak against authority, which could have real consequences for them. And to think about what we can do in that space as the manager, as the people who have that power, to create many different communication lines so that those types of challenges and issues can be brought forward, but also to take care of them, right? When those happen, because they are experiencing trauma, and that communication is the endpoint of that trauma, or the symptom of that trauma. So yeah, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, I love it when people ask questions. And it's so good to see you. Great. So, for those who are new to Remix EQ Live, today's show is one of the formats that we broadcast live. So, in our interview shows, I sit down with one or two guests and I ask questions that reveal their origin stories, their superpowers, and their feats in battles against injustice. But when I show up solo, I really aim to hold space for us to reflect together because reflection is really necessary for us to perform this critical work. And as we come to a close, I want to remind you of the two reflection prompts today for you to consider. The first was, which of your past experiences compelled you into battle against injustice? And you can think about this in terms of your pivotal moment, like the sixth grade experience that I shared, or a series of experiences and interactions that led you to join up and fight this battle. The second prompt is, how have you joined forces with others in your pursuit to make the world a more just place? And I think this is great to think about why you might join. So, do you want to build capacity? Do you want to grow your impact? Or are you really looking to build community with your people, with your posse of justice pursuers? And of course, you are welcome to add your responses and your questions and your comments to this space so we can continue our dialogue following this episode. And these prompts can also be conversation starters with those who you work with or who you wish to work with. And of course, they can be used for you to take advantage of in your personal journaling practice. So thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad I answered the question. Thanks. Good. Thank you for joining. And thank you all. I just want to remind you that I will be back on Friday, April 28th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern for another Remix EQ Live episode. I will interview Deepa Iyer, the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Building Movement Project. We will be in dialogue about her work leading solidarity and social movement projects. It seems very fitting. So watch your feed, check your inbox so you have the details to tune in to the next show. And of course, share these details with your people. So until then, visit the Remix EQ Live episode for webpage for episode recordings and more information about our inspiring guests and upcoming events. And also, you can discover new ways to support the Remix EQ community through donation or by purchasing merch. And while you're on the show's webpage, please poke around the website and learn more about my business, Blue Knowledge, and our growing family of brands and services, which advance equity in schools and communities. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. And of course, I invite you to connect with me too. So thank you, Remix EQ community, for your engagement, your comments, and your encouragement, and of course, your rally, which is how we recognize, appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erika Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live. See you next time.